From the Digital Media Center, on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the Southern Oregon Program of the Year and the Best Education Show. I'm your producer and host, John Letts. Ramping Up Your English is an instructional support program for intermediate level English learners. Now, if you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English and you want to reach higher levels of English proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs and get you closer to your goal. Ramping Up Your English is for English learners from all language backgrounds and for people of all ages. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our current thematic unit is Native Americans. This is segment 1 of episode 79. This is also our first episode to explore the social studies theme of Native Americans, also called American Indians or Indians Americans, and in Canada called First Nations. Now, when starting a new academic unit, it's customary to present an overview of the content, a way of setting the scene to make sense of the content that follows. That's especially true for learners of a new language. Well, let's see that overview presented in this video.
From sea to shining sea, the vast continents of North and South America teemed with tribal peoples, developing their own values and their own ways of adapting to this ever-changing landscape. Over 500 tribes are recognized in the United States alone. They will all tell you that they've been here since time immemorial. It's impossible for us to get our minds around such lengths of time. Evidence shows the first migration from Siberia across the land bridge we call Beringia happened up to 30,000 years ago. These migrations continued until sea levels rose and may have continued beyond that using watercraft. Following huge mammals we call mammoths, waves of hunter-gatherers moved into territory never before inhabited by Homo sapiens. These groups found passages through ice sheets that were up to a mile thick, enduring life on the edge of survival to learn from this land. The learning of how to survive and thrive is evident in the faint traces they left behind, evidence that at least some survived to populate these continents and pass down their hard-won knowledge to the heirs who are still very much here on this land where they laid the first human footprints. These groups found this land rich in all they needed as they expanded southward. They developed an ethic of deep appreciation and gratitude for plants and animals that gave them life. They didn't see themselves as apart or superior to the animals that thrived here. They lived a communal life, yet enjoyed a level of personal freedom that we could scarcely imagine today. There were also challenges, to be sure. There were winters of starvation and conflicts with neighboring groups. As one tribal member said, "We didn't have much, but we lived a full and meaningful life." Many of these groups formed nations and built great cities. These were highly organized societies formed after thousands of years of living on this land. In some cases, the same land supported a much larger population than it does today. The North American continent contained a great diversity of civilizations. Some we call advanced. Some were abandoned by their inhabitants. Whether in great cities or lonely forest, a storm like no other was moving in from the east, a storm that would bring unimaginable devastation to these people and their culture. The arrival of Europeans swiftly killed up to 90% of those who had direct or even indirect contact. Much of the devastation was through savage violence and manipulation. Spanish explorers were followed by seekers of great wealth, eager to employ murderous means to their goals, etched on stone here by people who had no way of knowing that their ways of life were doomed. While Europeans and their descendants embraced a narrative of intrepid explorers discovering continents and great rivers, entire villages succumbed to disease for which they had no immunity, and invaders who brought dogs of war to terrorize these people into submission. By the arrival of English colonists, tribes in North America were battered by shifting alliances between Spanish, French, English, and Dutch occupiers. The same pattern of deadly diseases and attacks continued, only now they were unwittingly entangled in European conflicts and dominated by exploitive trade practices. As long as the rivers run, this was the promise made and broken countless times with the birth of the United States of America and its ensuing treaties. By the 1830s, Indian land was being occupied by Europeans, and Native Americans were removed by force west of the Mississippi River. The land that had sustained them for millennia was lost.
We were the Shawnee Nation. We were here in Ohio from sometime 1700 until the Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830. We, along with another tribe that is now called the Seneca Cayuga, we were located on Lewistown Reservation. We were called the Mixed Band, and so it was the Shawnees and the Senecas. We were the first to be forcibly removed from the state. So when I look out at these hills, perhaps you look out and say, we're having the signs of autumn. We see the yellow, we see the gold, we see the red. And instead I look out and I wonder, did my forefathers walk here? And if they did, who were they? Because you see, we lost almost everything when we were forced to remove from Ohio in 1832.
There were no places west of the continent to remove the indigenous people who lived in the vast western area, and despite their spirited resistance, their populations again were reduced through violence. With the survivors of this genocide confined to reservations that were a tiny fraction of the area where they had once lived. This forced removal from their homelands and the subsequent confinement to reservations was called the Indian Wars. It ended in a massacre at a place called Wounded Knee. While Wounded Knee ended military violence, the suffering of Native Americans was far from over. Most reservations were places of suffering and death. Indian children were removed from their families and sent to boarding schools in an attempt to kill the Indian but save the man. Through their incredible resilience, survivors of these atrocities are still here, insisting that the United States honor its treaties and claiming their sovereignty. With thousands of years of history and hundreds of years of suffering, Native Americans not only have a past, they are very much present today and looking forward to winning a brighter future.